came back for the love of this, to come and shut this man up.
No, he can talk. When cage close, we're gonna watch. I'm come here for smash this guy.
The wait is over. On October 6th, former two-weight champion, the Notorious Conor McGregor, returns to the Octagon to face UFC lightweight champion, Khabib the Eagle Nurmagomedov. The Russian wrecking machine has been unstoppable on his journey to the UFC title. And at UFC 229, he will look to extend his winning streak to 27 by taking out a bitter rival.
Oh, big shots by McGregor!
A unique mix of skill, confidence and character, Conor McGregor reached unprecedented levels of success in the UFC by becoming the first fighter to simultaneously hold 2 UFC championship belts.
History has been made!
With the lightweight gold now in Khabib's possession, the Notorious One is back in an effort to reclaim what was once his. Hello and welcome to UFC Inside the Octagon. John Gooden alongside Dan Hardy, and boy, what a big show we have got for you. UFC 229, Dan, apparently the biggest fight in the history of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Are you excited for this one?
I just have to remember to breathe all the way through this. I was going through the playlist last night and I realised I'm hyperventilating because I'm so excited. So I'm going to try and breathe, John. If I start to go blue in the face, let me know and I'll just take a moment.
Well, I've tried to keep everything down here until now. We're allowed to get excited about it now for you guys. So this fight, Dan.
Yes.
There's a lot to talk about, of course. But the fans are sort of saying, is it as easy as Conor gets it done early, Khabib gets it done late?
The thing is that there's that question, and that's why we're going to tune in, because we know full well that it can go either way. We could either get a 13-second starching from Conor, or we can get a 25-minute mauling from Khabib, and anything in between can happen. So, literally, I mean, we're going to spend probably 30 minutes talking about this and still have no idea what's going to happen because It's that kind of fight.
Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the fights. No, let's get to the facts and the stats then and take a look at this. Ooh, I'm not sure that Mr. McGregor will be happy that there's
no belts
on there, which I'm sure he's going to come out firing on the night. So we're talking about Conor. We know he's got a really great reach, which I know that we're going to be talking about. What else is jumping off the page for you?
I mean, we can highlight some stuff. Obviously, the first simultaneous 2-division champion in the UFC, that was massive. But that, for me, is just kind of a token. The actual content of these guys' careers is what fascinates me more than anything. It's what the work they've done to get into this position. I mean, all the stats, they look wonderful. Obviously, most takedowns land in the UFC fight is going to be key in this one because if he can put 21 takedowns on McGregor, even if he defends most of them, that's going to be a massive impact to Conor's progress, to his conditioning. You know, highest knockdown rate, 4th highest striking rate. All these play into the idea that Conor is just going to be throwing volume at Khabib, but measured volume. He can't throw with power every time. There's so many things to talk about. Let's get into it, John, because I'm champing at the bit here. I'm ready to go.
Well, I'm just going to pull you back for just 1 second. He does not know what it's like to lose a fight.
And there's a positive and negative there. There's a positive and negative there. We like an unbeaten fighter, but then there's an unbeaten fighter's confidence that can sometimes play in against them. And I sometimes feel like, particularly when you get to this level, a couple of losses on your record can just kind of keep you a little bit more realistic. So, yeah, we can celebrate an unbeaten record, but there are drawbacks to it, I do feel, particularly going into this one.
OK, I can feel your energy now, Dan. And I know, knowing you, that you've really gone into the depths of the archives for this. And I'm sure you've looked at the 1-0 record of both of these fighters as well. So what have you managed to dig up? What's consistent? What's changed? What are we looking at?
OK, well, they both started out pretty much as the fighters that they are today. They've just gotten so much better as they've progressed. OK. Now, if you look at Conor McGregor, the old Cage Warriors days, he comes out, look, wide stance, backs his opponent up immediately and maintains a long-range striking style. You know, even in here when he's clinched, he's still got a hand on the back of the head, so he's measuring. As soon as a takedown is a threat, he switches into takedown defense mode, which obviously is going to be important here. And I mean, let's just have a quick look at that. There are lots of little moments to celebrate about both of these fighters, and this is one of them. It's the reaction time. So going from striking to grappling, sometimes people get caught up striking to grappling to grappling to striking is what Khabib's all about, that constant work rate. So moments like this where Conor does circle himself off the fence and his opponent immediately throws that slip just there. I mean, I know it's just a minor thing, but it just shows where Conor's mind is at and what he's capable of. And then he immediately goes back to this, building that long frame, building that wall. He's got several techniques he likes to use, the long jab, the lead hook kick, the chop leg kick. I mean, he's got a whole selection of stuff he can use. But everything is designed to keep somebody on the outside of his range so he can measure when they're going to step in. Whenever somebody does step into Conor, he's doing it on their terms. He's doing it on Conor's terms, which means Conor can then start thinking about countering, drawing a further attack so he can really punish them. And when it comes to takedown defense, he's got good takedown defense. He's got good balance. And he's always going to be thinking like a striker. So even in situations where Khabib is in on the legs, he's trying to wrestle, as Conor's defending, if there's a moment to strike, you can guarantee he's going to. And we saw those Travis Brown elbows. You've got to think Khabib's head is a lot of the time on the hip. Could be very vulnerable to that.
Did the Travis Brown elbows before Travis Brown?
Exactly. So did the Conor McGregor elbows? That's the question. So let's switch over to Khabib. Same thing again with Khabib. His foundation is his wrestling. But a lot of the time in fights, he kind of holds back just for a second and then he decides to go. And when he's decided he's committing to the fight, he goes until the fight's finished. Now, he's a little more measured now. Not a great deal, though. I still like this aggression that we get out of him. And because he's got such a strong wrestling base, we know that he can crash forward and not really be in a great deal of trouble. We saw the eagle punch there, which we'll talk about in a second, but we have seen that early in his career as well. But this is really what it's all about, chaining together takedowns. Moving a human being around or moving around a human being against their will is what Khabib is a master at. Look at this sequence here. So big takedowns, high amplitude takedowns, really good not only for getting the crowd on your side, for getting people excited, but also for disorientating your opponent. Because in that half second when they land on the floor, and funnily enough, it's exactly the same as we see against from DC as well, with basically the heavyweight version of Khabib.
And
big
same stable
takedowns,
as well. Yeah.
Absolutely, same with Cain Velasquez, you know what I mean? Big takedowns, slam them, and then immediately work to control. So you can see here, and this little sequence here is like a microcosm of what Khabib's expanded into a whole career. So he gets the big takedown here, big slam, lifts him over his hip, whole body weight onto him as he lands, beautiful work, and then he immediately circles over. Now, his opponent does a good job of bellying down here and turning into the turtle position, but this is obviously where Khabib likes to work from. He loves that far side wrist control. He starts to hammer away, and then as his opponent circles, he immediately drops into side control, and then he's going to look for the crucifix. That little sequence on its own is something that Khabib has pretty much made a career out of. I'll reinforce that as we go on, but it's worth mentioning he also does have some submissions on his career in the early stages. We've not seen a great deal other than the Michael Johnson fight in the UFC, but the submission threat is got to be on Conor's mind as soon as he starts to get tired, because Khabib will beat him up until the submission becomes available. I don't think he'll chase the submission, and any time he was getting submissions earlier on in his career, it was because he was in the top position, he was working for something, he got an armbar, he fell off for the armbar, and then they sat up and worked the triangle from there. So again, he's not pulling guard, he's not working off his back by option. He'll do that if he needs to, if he's got a submission, but most of the time he wants to be on top and he wants to be the oppressor in every one of these situations.
I don't think he wants to let Conor off the hook with a submission.
No.
I think he wants to put a hurt.
I think you're right.
Genuine dislike here. I can't wait to talk about the eagle punch. That's fascinating. So my thoughts on that, we're talking about two range specialists, but very different sides of the range.
Yes. Opposite ends of the spectrum. Absolutely opposite ends of the spectrum. The difference between the two, obviously, Conor needs to maintain the range in order for his game plan to come to fruition. Khabib needs to limit that space.
Fascinating.
He needs to take it away. So for me, the onus is on Khabib to put the pressure on Conor immediately. Now, I'm not expecting Khabib to do this. This was a surprise when I saw him running down Barbosa like this. But then in hindsight, I look back and I think, well, Barbosa's a kicking specialist, so the best thing you can get him to do is to be running backwards all the time.
Good point.
Now, if Barbosa's a boxing specialist, if he's got powerful hands, there's much more of an opportunity for him to set his feet and throw back as Khabib's moving forward. But in this equation, Khabib knew that once he'd got Barbosa backpedaling, he could just continue falling forward, throwing punches, working in the takedowns, and it's all going to work towards that exhaustion, that quitting mentality that he tries to instill in his opponents. You see here against Iaquinta, against the guy that's got a low base that likes to punch as opposed to kick, he's far more cautious. He's trying to find his way in. And he does a lot of reactionary stuff. A lot of his striking is reactionary because his main focus is getting the takedown. A lot of the time against someone that's got good hands, he'll lunge in from a long distance and he'll grab a hold of something and then he'll just keep a hold of it. It's like a dog on a bone. He's going to keep a hold of that until he gets you to the floor. Now, it is worth mentioning that these takedowns that he got on Iaquinta here were early in the fight, before sweat became a factor. And I feel like as this fight progressed, it was the takedowns up against the fence that he had the success with. The low singles started to fail because Iaquinta was able to slide out of them. So I feel like, although that may work in the early rounds, if he's able to get Conor back up against the fence, his takedowns are far more valuable to him because it's much easier for him to get into a body lock. Again, there's loads of stuff to talk about, so I'm going to keep returning to stuff as the show goes on.
OK, well, let's go back to the thought about Conor being the master of the long range then, and you were saying that he does that with many different weapons. Can you show us some of those weapons that you're talking about?
Absolutely. I want you to think about it like this. So when Conor first comes out, he has several different techniques that he uses to build a wall. It's like a shield wall, and it's imaginary. It gives his opponent the impression that if they step into that space, he's going to punish them for it. Look at this. Every time Max Holloway steps back into range, there's something there. The lead chop kick's a massive one. He always targets that, and he's going to be using that against Khabib a lot. It's just a rangefinder. But what it allows him to do is it allows him to drop down from that, bang, and step straight into a left hand if he needs it, if they continue to progress forward.
Do you honestly think he's going to use these low kicks?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
I do think he's going to use that lead chop kick because I think he accepts that Khabib is going to try and be bullying forward and pushing forward. Conor's very accurate where he places the technique. So I'm just going to skip this on as I'm talking because the lead chop kick's going to be useful because even if Khabib's level changing and Conor's able to jam that, he's able to push the knee to the outside, think southpaw v orthodox. He's chopping into that lead leg, which means it's going to buckle outwards, which is going to slow the pressure down. Even if it doesn't stop the takedown attempt, it's going to give Conor a second to buy himself that moment to defend. And he is great at defending takedowns from a strike. So I'll talk about that in a second. This is something else that's going to be useful as well, and he uses this with really good placement. Now, he used it a couple of times against Max Holloway. He used it really, really well against Chad Mendes as well, creating space with the back leg kick. And sometimes he has had this kick caught as well. Sometimes he gets it caught and elevated, but he's so good at getting his leg out of those positions that, again, it's not much of a risk for him. He's still going to do it. Like, let's have a look at the Mendes stuff. The Mendes stuff's next. So in this fight, he was just kind of chipping away at Mendes, just toes in the midsection, interrupting his breathing patterns, making it uncomfortable. Against Brimage, it was much more about stifling his forward movement. Look at that. I mean, again, it's timing. There's not a great deal of space that's available to him to utilise the kick. But when he does utilise it, it's placed perfectly. Brimage is moving forward. Conor picks his back foot up. And bam, right in the solar plexus. And you can see how that upsets Brimage's forward momentum. Like, it's going to do the same with Khabib if he's able to place it and out of the way. I mean, there's always a conscious thought process of, I've struck and now I'm moving. I've struck and now I'm moving. I'm still maintaining that space. Even when I'm stepping into strike, I'm still creating that space. Like, going back to his old fights, this is Dave Hill. Catching him with that high kick is going to be a good as well because Khabib does level change. And like I said, Conor's so accurate about placing his feet and his hands where he wants them that he's able to make the most of those small opportunities, which is why it's so beautiful to watch him compete. I mean, Dennis Siver, again, same situation. He backed him up, kept using the head kick, but kept maintaining that distance, that space. Chop away, but come back, return back to square hips so you're ready for them. And then we've also got to consider the spinning attack as well. Andy Freelander got up out of his seat from that spinning attack. It's just something else to bear in mind because a lot of the time when Conor's fighting, he likes people to circle away from his left hand, which, as a southpaw, is quite unusual. Normally, you would want someone to step onto that, so you're making the most of their power. But as they're circling away, he's developed this whole game around them moving away from his power hand. And one of the techniques now we're starting to see him use, particularly in the Brandao fight, was that spinning attack. So, I mean, if you've got Conor in front of you, you've just got so many things to think about. And that's why people either freeze up or do things out of panic. And I think he's leaning heavily on that against Khabib.
So it's like a wood chipper. How do you then kind of get through this? Is a guy with, like, swords? I guess he's throwing swords at you. How the heck is he going to get through those? They're not defences, they're attacks.
Yes, they are. They are. They're measured attacks. And the intention is to not hurt the person, but it's to expose them for the attack. And this is where Khabib's style has to be overwhelming enough to force Conor to stop thinking and be reactive. There's a difference. If Conor's dictating the pace of the fight, he's making the decisions for him and for his opponent. If his opponent's constantly moving forward, striking and level changing, Conor is then being purely reactive to what's in front of him. I'm not saying the window of opportunity for the left hand's not there, even in that situation. But there's a lot less chance to plan it, to prepare it. Exactly. So when we go back to Khabib's style, the thing that I want to pull out, the thing that I would be talking to him about in his corner is that constant pressure forward. Even if you're not striking, he did a great deal against Michael Johnson, who obviously, as we know, has got good takedown defence. He showed that in the first round. But as Khabib's moving forward and testing his takedown defence game, every time Michael Johnson gets out, little jog after him, continue to punch him, continue to work. But at the same time, he's also allowing Michael Johnson to work. He's also allowing Michael Johnson to throw his strikes, and he's not throwing on his terms. He's throwing on Khabib's terms because it's Khabib that's pushing forward.
Right.
So, like, you see this, I mean, what was this, third, fourth time he attempted the takedown before Michael Johnson went for the guillotine? Like, it's that persistence that is going to overwhelm McGregor if he's able to keep it up. Same thing with the Barbosa fight. And again, as I said before, I know it's different because Barbosa needs the space for his kicking game. But once you'd seen him backpedaling for 5 minutes and Khabib just kind of slowly jogging forward, you're thinking to yourself, he's fading. Khabib sees he's fading, so that's his confidence is on the rise. He's going to continue marching forward, and his opponent's just going to slowly get more and more discouraged. And we talk about mixing his striking in. We've mentioned the eagle punch. This is where we'll talk about it. Because what's interesting about this is that it's a very unusual punch. The reason I feel like it works most of the time is because people are expecting the takedown. Look, there's a takedown defender, boom. There's the punch, comes straight after it.
I've got a line for you, Dan. He swoops in.
Swoops.
He swoops in.
Very nice, John, very nice. I mean, the direction that the punch comes, it's so unusual. This is a perfect spot because we can actually see. I'm going to be a bit of a nerd here and just explain what I'm saying. So you can see there, look, that's the deltoid muscle that's engaged there. Now, when you're throwing a punch, in that situation, the punch looks like it's coming straight because the backward chain, it's not coming in a hook situation here. It comes up. It's so strange. He engages the whole deltoid muscle and he swings it up. But in order to get momentum into the punch, he has to dip first. So the dip with the punch coming up can also look very much like a level change. So a lot of the time, you'll find people, as soon as they see him level change, they actually move onto the punch because they're expecting that level change. They're expecting to have to lower their level to defend it. So although if I was critiquing the technique, I would say it's poor, and I wouldn't train someone to do that technique. Because it's working for Khabib, and because it's unorthodox, he's more likely to land it against Conor, who's more familiar with those regular movement patterns of a boxer. So I think there are benefits here, and as we saw in the Chalarus fight, knocked him down beautifully with that. Really nice placement on that. I mean, he did a great job of recovering. But Thiago Tavares, not so much. Same thing again, slight dip in this one. Look, just a little dip, just enough. A little swoop, John.
A little swoop.
A little swoop. He just dipped in, he caught him. Let's have a look at the replay, because this is even better. Look, you can see it comes under the chin. Knuckles are down. It's so almost like he's throwing it like a jab. The arm's in a hook position. It's so strange. But, I mean, you know, we're still learning about what works in combat sports, and Khabib is at the forefront of this. So if this punch works, then it might be worth studying. Look at that, it's beautiful. It's coming up under the chin.
Just disguised, I guess, isn't it?
Exactly. And you've got to think, if he was throwing that like a hook, that's hitting Thiago Tavares' guard right there. So it's actually finding its way around the guard.
Yeah, it's like an uppercut, but you don't see it. Yeah.
It's very risky. It's a very risky technique to try and defend. I would imagine if Conor sees him moving, he's just going to give that space and try and counter him after it. Because to stand in the pocket, it's just difficult to gauge where that punch is going. And also, if there's a level change coming directly afterwards.
OK, so let's start closing in these ranges.
OK.
Let's get to the mid-range, which some boxers will like that mid-range. How does it look with these two?
OK, it looks excellent with both of them because they're both great at this range. This is really where it gets interesting because Conor has to manage that range so well by keeping space, and Khabib has to manage that range so well by getting through it without getting knocked out. Now, this was where we were at with Aldo, and what Conor's doing here is you can see this drop back. He does this beautiful thing with his feet, which a lot of the time, all of this stuff that he's throwing here, This is all smokescreen stuff. This is just purely to get reactions out of his opponents. He's trying to get them to come forward. So you can see he's got a real long stance. And what you'll see with the Aldo fight as it progresses is he tests the guard, and he
I like
slips.
how you say how it progresses. All maybe 11 seconds of actual action, but there's so many
There's
details
so many things
in
that
this.
happen. That's the thing. Like you can see Conor's intention immediately because he's there. He tests the guard, but then he keeps dropping back. You keep seeing him doing that onto his back foot. That is the preparation for that forward momentum. He did the same thing against Alvarez. He did the same thing against Dennis Siver. I feel like he's going to do the same thing against Khabib because it makes sense to use this technique when someone's moving forward. And when you've got someone who's moving forward as disciplined and skilled as Aldo, and it worked, if you've got someone as aggressive and reckless as Khabib, you've got to think Conor's seeing that window of opportunity and he thinks he can exploit it. So just to have a look at this, just watch what he does with his feet, drop back. So every time he drops back, he's ready for the counter. If he doesn't get the right look, then he tests the guard again. Test the guard, drop back again a second time, look. Testing the guard. He's always just in front of them to try and get them to attack so he can use that momentum on top of his own power. I mean, there's no doubt he's got big power in his hands, particularly his left hand. But even at the lighter weights, it makes so much more sense to utilise some of their power as well. I mean, at heavyweight, you can just touch somebody and they fall over. But in the lighter weight classes, it's far more about precision and timing when it comes to knockouts. And because Conor's so consistent with it, you've got to think he's doing something right. And it's because he's utilising this forward momentum. I mean, you can see it over and over again with Eddie Alvarez, who basically lost the patience game. That's what happened to the Eddie Alvarez fight. Conor was more patient. Conor knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to stand in front of him. He wanted to test his guard and get Eddie Alvarez. There was even times when he's kind of showing him the side of his chin. He's like, come on, throw your right hand here. Look, watch this. I mean, look at that. I'm going to pull this back to the shot because when we talk about range management specialists, and I don't want to get too excited here, but honestly, with the amount of work and research that I've done, the amount of years I've been watching this sport, I can't think of another fighter in mixed martial arts that has an understanding of range like Conor McGregor. Like, this is a situation where he's been teasing Eddie Alvarez, he's been showing him the side of his chin, like, come on, throw the right hand, come on, because he's waiting for this left-hand counter. As soon as Eddie Alvarez commits, Conor knows that he's got to create some space before he can counter. But he's going to utilise as much space as possible. So this is a full extension of the punch. Now, Conor's ready to counter. You can see the left hand's ready to go. He's got that. He knows that's coming over the top because there's his target. And if his opponent's moving onto him, he's doing half the work for him. But watch how little space he gives. I mean, we're looking at Conor's nose here. That's top of the glove, just glances the nose.
That's
and
ridiculous.
Conor's already ready to fire. And you've got to think, if you're Eddie Alvarez and you've thrown your right hand, full power, full extension, with the intention of landing it, and it misses, like slow motion, you can see that fist falling, and there's the left hand coming over the top, aiming for your temple. And that's exactly what happened here, look. Beautiful, over the top. Perfect twist in the body, fires through, and when the punch lands, there's still a bend in the arm. There's still more drive in that punch if he needs it, which obviously he didn't need in this equation, but it's there if he needs it. He puts his feet in the perfect position. And I'm not saying we've always seen him do this. In the Diaz fight, he didn't do it. In the first Diaz fight, I feel like that was one of the mistakes he made, is that he didn't cover that ground. But when he does, and when he puts himself in those positions, he's absolutely devastating.
I remember Conor telling me after he won that Cage Warriors lightweight title for his 2 belts at Cage Warriors, he was telling me about that counter. And he said, John, I've spent my whole career with orthodox fighters throwing their right hand at me. I see it all the time, and he's just mastered it.
Right.
To absolute perfection. But he has made some adjustments as well down to that left hand, which you're going to show us.
Yes, he has. This is where my inner nerd really indulges, because this for me is fascinating, because you've got someone who's an incredibly cerebral fighter, very intelligent, facing off against a very difficult opponent, someone that's 2 weight classes above where he was fighting at the time, that's incredibly durable, that's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that likes that long-range, lazy boxing style where he'll just slap you to bits for 5 rounds. And what we saw Conor do was miss a lot of the time. He came out throwing a lot of capoeira kicks. I think he had a bit of a thing about trying to land one of those capoeira kicks going in. But I felt like he was overzealous. I felt like he felt like his power was going to transfer perfectly to welterweight, and it didn't. And I also, and this is a weird visualization I have in my head. The difference between Nate Diaz and most other fighters are like hitting a punch bag. You hit the punch bag, you feel resistance. Nate Diaz is like punching one of those inflatable floor standing punch bags, right? The weight's in the base, which is why he's got such a long stance. He does that smooth criminal drop back when you throw a punch at him. So, like, you've got to think, if Conor's throwing full power into these shots and they are just glancing off the head, same as the Eddie Alvarez situation, just glancing off the head, he's overexposed. You'll see a lot of the time when he's throwing this punch, as they miss, his back leg's dragging. Look, I mean, he kept throwing the uppercut as well, but underestimated the durability of Nate Diaz. But a lot of the time when he's missing the left hand, he's dragging his back leg. Like he's missing, he's overextending, he's not managing his energy systems very well, which is what he said in the post-fight interview. And then when you've got Nate in front of you that's just absorbing these shots, then your confidence starts to wane. You start to get a bit discouraged. And then he's just walking forward with a bit of blood on his face and starts to slap you. So that Conor McGregor goes back to the drawing board. And I will say he was very humble in his post-fight interview, which gave me the impression that he was going to make these adjustments. So he comes into the second fight with the same problem in front of him, the same weight class, everything. He laid the table perfectly, exactly the same, so he could show that he'd made these improvements. And he did. And the difference in this fight is that he wasn't overreaching on his left hand. He was picking his shots. He was far more measured. He was snapping in and out again, so he was avoiding the Stockton slap counter when he was missing his left hand. Look, I mean, he's snapping that and coming back. It's much more of a karate style of technique. But same thing as the Alvarez fight, which I want to show you in a second. He makes the adjustment with his feet. He moves his feet into place. Watch this. And he does it so well. I was actually speaking to his boxing coach at the Crumlin gym, and I was talking to him about footwork, because you walk into a boxing gym with these lines painted on the floor where they do the footwork. So I was interested to know their understanding of how to approach a fight with your feet. And he was talking about there's no point in bouncing. Like, step yourself into range. Step yourself out of range. And that's what we see Conor doing. But because he's so sly with it and so smooth with it, and he hides it behind his hands, people don't notice that he's edging himself into range. Same thing that happens here. Like, you can just watch the lead hand of Conor. He just kind of teases with the lead hand, but moves his front foot at the same time, look. Like, he's just jogging himself in. Look, there's the tease of the lead hand, and then he steps in again.
Is that where the phrase "take your feet with you"?
Absolutely, take your feet with you. A lot of people overreach, and if you watch the first Diaz fight, you'll see Conor doing that, throwing the punch and then his back leg dragging behind him, because his upper body momentum is carrying him. So this is where it gets really interesting. Let's just watch the replay, and I'm going to talk you through what I'm seeing here, because this just looks like a simple knockdown, but it's absolutely not. There's so much more to it. Okay, so let's pull him back into this 50-50 position. So Conor's trying to tempt Eddie Alvarez to move forward, but he's not having any of it because he's already been knocked down once, okay? He's not engaging in that. He realizes that if he throws his right hand, he's getting countered. So now he's starting to be a bit more guarded. So now Conor has to make the adjustment because he knows that Eddie's not going to make up that half distance. So Conor has to do it for him instead. But obviously, he's got to do it in a calculated way. He can't be too obvious with it. So, and this works perfectly with where they are in the octagon, because I can use the line on the floor. Okay, let's just extend this punch out fully. Right. So there's the full extension of that left hand, okay? Let's just draw a line down that. So that left hand, it intersects straight down there. No, let me go again. Let me draw this way. It's important this is in the right line so you can see where I'm at. So that's going straight down to his heel. Okay. Right. What Conor's done is he's thrown his left hand and he's created an illusion that that's the extent of his reach, okay? Eddie Alvarez now is under the impression that that's the extent of his reach as well. So that allows Conor to exploit that understanding of range on Eddie Alvarez's part. So he's thrown the left hand out. Eddie Alvarez, that's caught him on the side of the head. He's like, okay, that's the extent of Conor's reach. Conor then reinforces that with a very lazy jab. Watch this, and the line stays perfectly in the same spot. Look at that. So that jab hits exactly the same target, same range, same distance.
He's almost pulling it back, isn't he?
He's pulling it back. He's measuring it because he wants to create that illusion of that line there, that limitation of his reach. But at the same time as he's throwing the jab, it hides the jog forward of the feet. Okay, so we'll argue that that's a full extension of that punch right now, okay? So watch this. The little jog forward of the feet jog forward. Now look at the full extension of that punch. That same line that he created the first time around is now where his elbow's at. But we didn't see him jog forward with the feet because we were thinking about the hands. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like the understanding of how to gain and give a couple of inches here and there is what makes the difference between a punch that glances and a punch that knocks a person down. And that, for me, that's just perfect range management. We can see it again from the top position because you can see where Eddie's feet are. Little jog forward behind the jab. There's the jab, jog forward, and bang. And he gains, 12 inches, 14 inches on his punch. That's the understanding that Khabib's going to struggle with, because if Khabib's just moving forward thinking he's just punching into wherever Conor is, and Conor's measuring that understanding of range of Khabib's, that's when Conor can start setting traps for him. And as good as Khabib is in the clinch range, in the striking range, his understanding of that is very elementary, in my opinion. I feel like Conor's light years ahead in that sense. So there's a massive risk there if Khabib's got confidence from his last fight against Iaquinta, say, and he feels like he can now kickbox. Okay. Because it's a different game.
All right. Well, talking of different games, shall we talk some grappling?
Let's do it.
And mauling, etc.
Mauling. Okay. So there's no secret Khabib wants to get around those hands. He wants to close distance, he wants to get the body lock. If we get these high amplitude takedowns, this is going to further impact the conditioning of Conor. He's going to be scrambling to get back to his feet. He's going to chain a second takedown onto the end of it. And there's a point where you just go, oh, all right, I'll just lay down for a minute. I accept the takedown. Even if you defended 3, 4, 5, 10 takedowns, we know he can throw 21 at you in 15 minutes. If you're fighting for 25 minutes, you've got to think he's going to be continually throwing. So if we go through the system, so he gets the takedown, he drags them down, he sits them on the floor. Then he binds the legs. So we saw it against Barbosa here. I mean, it's horrendously uncomfortable to be caught in this position because you've got two options. You can see the legs are triangled. So your two options are, you can either escape the position by pushing and getting your knees free, or you can defend your face. You can't do both. You can't have your cake and eat it, John. Do you want your face or do you want the position? I mean, that's really where the situation is. So he puts people in this difficult situation where they've got to make that decision. He starts to land the shots. As soon as they start to focus on escaping, he goes back to striking. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know your arm's taken up, so now I'm going to hit you in the face. So then they start defending, and then he progresses his position. It's that constant creeping. It's like a shield wall. It's like the Greek hoplites. It's like a shield wall. He's just going to march you down and trample over you. And that's everything that he does. He's just taking chunks out of your game. This is really, really nice. And this shows what he's going to be trying to do against Conor when Conor's trying to stand up. So if Conor's accepting of the takedown, he's going to find himself in a position where he's getting beaten up. If he's trying to defend like Iaquinta is here, so you can see here he's got the switch. He's trying to get himself out this direction here. He's moving towards this base. So Khabib realises that, right? Watch this, beautiful work. He rolls his head under the arm, comes inside to then drive him towards the base that he wants. But at the same time as doing that, we can see the wrist control, the hip control on the far side. And the other thing I want you to concentrate on is this here. That's Khabib's knee. That's Khabib's right knee. And we're going to see him scrape this knee along the canvas. And at the same time, that's going to bring Iaquinta's base all the way around, which basically just makes this completely nullified. There's no point in this post here. So what you'll see Iaquinta do is, as soon as he realises he's losing that side, he's going to switch straight over and go to the opposite side. And this, again, just plays into Khabib's game. He abandons the post on that side. He goes over to the other side. He reaches, and then immediately Khabib's on his back.
It's brilliant.
Right? It's beautiful work. And then Khabib's on your back. And then you're thinking, OK, am I defending takedown? Am I defending rear naked chokes? No, you're not. You're defending wrist control because he's going to still try and punch you in the head. Because, like you said, he's not going to take the submission. He's going to beat you up until you want him to take the submission. Just like DC did with Anthony Johnson.
He's going to beat you up some more.
He's going to beat you up some more. I mean, it was third round against Michael Johnson, and like we were all sick of watching him getting punched in the face. Like it got to the stage at the end of the second round where I was like, like he's done. There's no coming back from this. And these situations where he finds himself in a crucifix, obviously working around from the turtle position as people start to roll, circles around to side control, pins the arm, then he's just ground and pounding all day. Like I said, he's got submissions from the top, he's got that reverse triangle, he's also got the Kimura. That's something to be considering as well.
Oh, I don't want to see this.
And it's worth mentioning that position, that reverse triangle position that he was in was first round. So he had this available to him all the way through the fight. He just continued to hit him. That's the mentality that Conor's got to deal with, because it's not going to be a quick jump on your back, choke you out, and you were the better man. Like, this is a war. These guys are coming to beat each other up. Conor wants to knock him out with one shot. Khabib wants to maul him and punish him for all the things he's said. There's no submissions in this until the later rounds.
I think people do overlook Conor's grappling game.
Yeah.
He's got a very jiu-jitsu style, Brazilian jiu-jitsu brown belt now. Remind us of some of the really nice stuff that he has shown us inside the octagon.
Well, as you said, I mean, because he's a striker, the majority of the time that's his game. That's what he wants to show us.
Yeah.
But there are times when he's had to lean on his ground game, the Max Holloway fight, for example. But when he has been challenged, he's shown great takedown defense. Look at his work against Brandao. Beautiful reversal in the air there, straight to the top position. Like, good spatial awareness, good balance. And I'm just going to pause this here. Anybody that's doing an X-guard sweep in the first round of an MMA fight against a black belt like Nate Diaz knows what they're doing on the ground.
Yeah.
You can't
And
tell me any
deserves some
different.
plaudits for it.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying he can have it all his way, because he's going to be in the defensive mode most of the time. But all of this is doing is just illustrating that Conor has an excellent awareness of what he's doing. Look at this shoulder pressure here into the fence. So even if he's not on top doing all this stuff to Khabib, he's going to be aware that Khabib's trying to do that to him. Do you know what I mean?
So that makes it easier to get out of those situations.
Exactly. Conor's learnt all these things because other people have done it to him at SBG. Like, he's had the likes of Cathal Pendred and John Kavanagh.
And Dylan Dennis.
And Dylan Dennis, of course, smashing him into the canvas. So he knows how that feels. He also knows his methods of escape. His takedown defense is excellent. He's very good at digging hooks. He's very good at finding his way off the fence to counter-strike when people are starting to chase after him and get discouraged, which we have seen from Khabib. He fails the first takedown, he just jogs after you, right? There's a left hand that he could run onto there. And just these little moments here where we see him, I mean, a beautiful guard pass straight to mount there against Dennis Siver. Again, I know people are going to say, Dennis Siver in comparison to Khabib's ground game, they're not comparable.
Show what he's done, though.
Absolutely. What all this is doing is it just illustrates that Conor knows what he's doing on the ground. He has an awareness of where he needs to be, of how to distribute his weight, and because he's got that understanding, he can reverse engineer it and defend Khabib's progress. My question is, can Khabib do the same thing with Conor's striking? And I don't think he can.
OK, well, let's flip it now. Don't want to be negative, but maybe let's look at some weaknesses.
OK.
And I'm going to call it the Conor fade. And I'm not
Yes.
referring to his hair. He does like a good new haircut.
He does.
He said after he fought Floyd Mayweather, everyone knows that I have an issue at a certain point in the fight, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah.
He's showing a little chink in the armour there, but I think that's the chemical reactions after a fight. Yes, he does have this cardio issue, and do you think that AKA are honing in on that?
I think so. I think Diaz highlighted it perfectly. I mean, when we discussed that, the one thing that we said about Diaz is that he'll beat you up until you shoot, because the Diaz brothers don't necessarily have a wrestling game. They force you to do the wrestling so they can choke you out.
Right.
And that's exactly what Nate did. So we know that Conor can be worn down, but at the same time, Conor learnt that lesson in the Diaz fight, and we've not seen him have that problem since. I mean, to get tired against Floyd Mayweather...
Mayweather fight, yeah.
It's a different sport. You're fighting probably the best defensive boxer of all time, so the likelihood is you're missing a lot of the shots. I mean, Conor's success rate with striking is not as high as you would think, but that's partly because he does throw shots just to kind of open up other techniques.
Doesn't care about the numbers.
Absolutely not. But then, like, if we look at the volume that he put into that first Diaz fight, so over the space of, 7 or 8 minutes, I think it was, Conor threw 165 punches. Now, just to put that in perspective, he threw 195 against all of the people that he's knocked out in the UFC, 7 fighters. So the same volume that he threw at Diaz is comparable to the 7 people that he stopped in his UFC career.
Right.
So you can see how the output against Diaz was much higher.
Yes.
And I think that Khabib feels like if he can make Conor work, and he can, to an extent, walk through those shots, hang on him, drag him to the floor, force him to use energy systems that he doesn't want to use, absolutely is going to expose that chink in his armour. I can't for a second believe that if Conor admitted after the Mayweather fight that he does have a limit to his conditioning, that the time between then and now, that's not been a focus of his training camp. I just think it would have to be.
Well, then that asks the question about the wrestling being a focus of his camp, but that I'll come on to in a second. Let's talk about another weakness, and I'm not sure about how you can train it, if indeed it is a weakness. And that's got to be Khabib's chin. People are asking this. I mean, the guy really hasn't... It's debatable whether he's even lost a round. But we did see against Michael Johnson, and our Quinter had, you know, a good couple of attempts with the right hand. What do you think?
My argument would... Absolutely, I agree. We saw just for a moment, and I think the reason people are making such a big deal about the Johnson fight is because for just a moment, Khabib just looked like another fighter. Right. He was on his heels for a second, he got caught with a clean shot. Like, we're questioning Khabib's chin, but he's never been dropped, he's never been knocked out. And yeah, he might get rocked back on his heels from time to time, but we don't know. Khabib might be able to just walk through punches like that. I mean, that's what we've seen so far. I mean, we got caught with one shot against Michael Johnson, but then just mauled him after that. So I get it. It's a chink in his armour that could potentially be exposed, but it hasn't been exposed yet, so we can't assume that he's got a glass jaw and Conor's going to knock him out, because we've got no basis for that. No.
OK, mental warfare. So we've had one press conference.
Yeah.
Conor's had this closed-door policy to media for this, and I don't know whether that's necessarily the right thing to do when you have such an ability to break people down before a fight. The reason, in my eyes, why he beat Aldo the way that he did was because he was on him and in his head for so long. He's had one opportunity this time. Was that enough? Did you see anything in a press conference that makes you think that Khabib is going to abandon all strategy and all notes from coaches and then go straight into Conor's trap?
No, I don't think so. I think Khabib. I think he had people off stage during the press conference that were telling him to keep his cool. I think he did a great job of just to an extent tuning Conor out. Conor did his best job at giving Khabib the impression that he's a wild man, that he's crazy, that he's a little bit unhinged. If you watch the World Tour against Aldo, he did the same thing against Aldo. The difference was in this scenario where Khabib's looking straight through him, Aldo was eyes watering, grinding his teeth, clenching his fists. Conor was getting the reaction there.
Yeah.
What that reaction led to was Aldo going 5, 6, 7, go, 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 and he just ran onto something. I don't think he's going to get that against Khabib. But what he's doing is he's giving Khabib the impression that he's going to bring that ferocity and that crazy intensity to the octagon. In which case, Khabib starts the first round like, what comes first? What comes first? Does it make him hesitant? Does it make him reckless? Both work into Conor's hands. Khabib showing up with calm, like, this is my fight, I'm going to take care of this, no problem. That's the Khabib Conor doesn't want to fight. He wants him to either be hesitant or overly aggressive, because they both work into Conor's favour. So I feel like all of that was just a package to kind of present Khabib with, this is who I might be in the first round. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think because that was reinforced in the Aldo fight, we saw that it works.
Yeah. And I think he rivals you for research when you look at all of the hot buttons.
Not the political stuff. I don't.
I mean, no. But you get the skills of trying to get underneath the skin and really going deep. And finding those areas. It just goes to show how well read this man is in all aspects of the game. So that was again quite a fascinating part of this one.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, the reason we love watching it is because in a press conference like that, it's so extreme, he's so outlandish, that he puts so much pressure on himself. Like, if he walks out and Khabib mauls him for 3 rounds and chokes him out, he looks even more ridiculous than he would have done if he'd have just sat there quietly. Do you know what I mean? So, like, Conor stacks the chips against himself in order to put that pressure, in order to create that pressure, because he knows he deals with that pressure better than his opponents most of the time.
And he doesn't need this anymore, Dan.
He doesn't.
He's coming back for the love.
Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because he does have enough money to never do anything else again.
That's fascinating.
So he's coming back because he wants to fight Khabib.
Oh, I love it. I love it. UFC 229. It is scheduled to be the biggest fight in the history of the UFC. How about that? In our years, we get to see this. Oh, I cannot wait. So, Keep the conversation going using the hashtag Inside the Octagon, the handle at UFC Europe. The comment section below, we will be watching. We hope you enjoyed the fight as usual, and we will be back for the next pay-per-view. But UFC 229 comes first.